What's going on, everybody? It's YG here, coming at you with a brand new video. In today's video, I'm bringing you guys something pretty interesting, at least in my opinion, and that is my Dogmatika Invoked branded Shaddoll deck profile, D.I.B.S for short, as I like to call it. I kind of coined that. And this is essentially just a mashup of like a bunch of different good engines that work together. Obviously, Dogmatika Invoked Shaddoll was already a thing, and it's been a kind of staple mainstay in the tournament setting. There's always that one guy in the corner at the regional or the YCS level event that decides he's going to bring it, and whether he wins or loses, he's going to cheese a few games out with Winda because, let's face it, Winda's just a really funny card. And because of its notorious ability to dodge the ban list over and over, it's something that's just going to be sticking around for a long time, and it has stuck around for a very long time. And with the introduction of the branded fusion package from the D.I.B.S Strike Structure deck back in March, the deck actually got a lot better, and I think the build can be a lot more unique than it used to be, and not just, you know, Mechabus pass, you know? And so without further ado, I'm going to bring you guys my Dogmatika Invoked branded Shaddoll / D.I.B.S deck profile for May 2022. Let's go ahead and get right into it. I'm going to actually do this in a bit of an interesting way compared to my normal deck profiles. Rather than going over the monsters, spells, and traps, I'm going to be doing more so sort of an engine sort of thing, because we are playing 4 different engines in the deck, and what better engine to start with than the boy himself. We have 3 copies of Alistair the Invoker. I'm going to try to center these as much as possible. Sorry, everybody. It's sort of really weird recording at my desk still in terms of my deck profile format. But we have 3 copies of Alistair the Invoker, 2 copies of Invocation, 3 copies of Magical Meltdown, and 1 copy of Terraforming. You know, I love the Aurora YGO playmat, but this cloth is just not it, man. It's so hard to slide cards across. So this is painfully standard for most builds that run Invoke stuff. You know, we got our 3 Alistair, we have our 2 Invocation, our 3 Meltdown, and then the 1 Terraforming. Meltdown is an actually incredible card, because not only is it protecting your Invocation and stuff, but it's also protecting your Branded Fusion, of course, and your Shaddoll Schism, which, by the way, is going to be ghost spelled every opportunity it can be if you don't have Meltdown on board. Keep that in mind. And so there's not really much to talk about here. It's just a standard cookie cutter Invoked engine, and there's not really much I change about it. Honestly, while playing the Invoke package for basically the first time in a tournament setting, it made me really sit and think that Mechabus is actually not that great of a card. So in this particular build especially, we aren't really wanting to use our hand resources that much because we have so many other things that are taking up our hand. We have Ab Cologne, we have Kit, we have the Mechabus, obviously, we have Lulubellion discard. We have so many different things that are making us send from our hand to grave that losing hand resources is something that's really crucial, especially with hand traps. And so, more often than not, I find myself sitting on Kaliga more than Mechabus, and then I also like to use Alistair later in the game for Agoides because Agoides is so strong. And so Mechabus usually isn't the preferred option, but if we have the resources to spare, then we can go ahead and use that. On to probably my favorite part of the deck, that is the Dogmatika package. We have 2 copies of Dogmatika Ecclesia the Virtuous, 1 copy of Dogmatika Fleur-de-Lis the Knighted, 1 copy of Dogmatika Maximus, and 2 copies of Nadir Servant. Honestly, MVP of the entire deck right here, other than D.I.B.S himself. I think this archetype is super, super powerful. I really like the 2 Ecclesia, by the way, with the 3rd Nadir being gone. I highly recommend it. I really enjoy having the access to it easier, because this engine can make or break your entire game state, because the Dogmatika engine is basically what accesses you your Shaddoll monsters the easiest way possible. Fleur-de-Lis is not only just an additional disruption, but the main card that I want to showcase is just how powerful Dogmatika Maximus is. This card is insane. So, unfortunately, while Despia is actually a really good matchup for this deck, Maximus kind of pluses them because they can send, you know, Albion, you know, their sprint stuff. Funnily enough, does Mirror Jade work off of that? Okay, no, it says control, not possession. Dude, I was about to actually scream if Mirror Jade worked from Maximus. That would actually just be game over. But no, Maximus being able to dump 2 is so insane for this deck. You can dump your Ab Cologne, you can dump your Albion, you can dump your Titaniclad, and you can dump your Natus. You have 4 targets out of your 15-card extra deck that you want to dump. And in certain matchups that don't plus from getting their stuff sent to the graveyard, like Despia, you can kind of just FTK them with this, because they really want their extra deck resources, especially something that likes to grind a lot, like Sky Striker, for example. They really want their stuff to stay in extra deck. So if you force them to send 2, especially if you can repeatedly do it over and over, you're going to outgrind them a lot, because one of the best things about this deck is that it has insane grind potential, except for against, you know, certain other decks, like I said, like Despia, because Despia is just in a whole other level in terms of fusion grinding. But you can grind a lot with this deck, especially with the Invoke stuff. And so Maximus just further allows you to do that by dwindling their resources while facilitating your own, and that is something I really enjoy about this engine in general. On to probably the second best, if not the best engine in the entire deck, that's the branded stuff. So the branded stuff really put in its work, because you really sit there and you think about it, and Mirror Jade is just better than Mechabus. So for our branded package, we are running the 3 branded fusion, of course, and then the 2 D.I.B.S, as well as 2 Spriggan's kit. This is actually more of a recent decision. I did this at the locals I just went to today and added the second kit. I was only playing the 1. But honestly, kit is just really powerful, because let's be real, there's a lot of normal summons in this deck. You have D.I.B.S, you have kit, you have Alistair. Technically, Ecclesia could be a normal summon in some situations. But that's probably one of the biggest weaknesses about the deck, is the amount of normal summons that you have. Sorry, I'm actually going to go ahead and scoot over the stuff a bit more towards my webcam, because I realized that in post I'm going to be having my sidebar up, and I kind of don't want my sidebar taking up all that space. But yeah, honestly, the branded fusion package is just absolutely crazy for the deck. Branded fusion being able to dump anything for any situation is so nice. Admittedly, you're almost never going to go into Albion because your light targets are really bad. You have your Dogmatika stuff and your Ghost Ogres, and that's like literally it. But sending the darks like Shaddoll Beast, Alistair, all sorts of things off of the Lubellian summon is just so strong, especially because this, depending on your matchup, if you have no other way to access your Winda, but Winda is kind of an auto win, like against something like Drytron, you can just use this and get a free Winda immediately off the Lubellian, and you can just completely shut down so many decks, because Winda is just an auto win button against so many different strategies. But most of the time, though, you are going to be summoning Mirror Jade, and Mirror Jade is a hell of a card. You have 4 total targets in your extra deck that involve D.I.B.S, so you have 3 things that you can send off of Mirror Jade, 2 of which being able to plus you, and so you really have a lot of different versatile things you can do off the Mirror Jade, because not only is the non-targeting banish of any monster really good, but the nuke during the end phase is really strong, plus he has the highest stat line of any monster in your extra deck that isn't a Goides when he's juiced up. And so Mirror Jade overall is just a really strong card, and just a million times better than Mechabus in my opinion, because you don't have to neg resources from your hand just to use the disruption effect. D.I.B.S on his own is also really strong, especially going second, because one of the main weaknesses with this deck is that going second isn't really its strong suit, so we do play a few cards to kind of facilitate that. But D.I.B.S guarantees baits out any sort of disruption, you know, like a Mirror Jade or any sort of negate, because if they don't, they're going to be in for a really bad time, because you're just going to slurp up their stuff to make a Mirror Jade, which is going to be really strong, let's be real. And then Kit's sort of an alternative normal summon in case we don't see Alistair. She also has the recovery, or not recovery, but follow-up special summon ability, which is okay, but most of the time that you have something engraved that lists D.I.B.S, you're going to have already summoned your Mirror Jade and used your branded fusion, or you use Nadir Servant and you can't fusion summon anyway, and so she's more of a normal summon than anything, but she is a pretty strong normal summon. Admittedly, she does have to put back in order to search, which is kind of unfortunate, but branded fusion is just so strong that in my opinion, I find it kind of worth it. I found myself in a few situations where I was like, wow, I would kind of rather summon Kit than the Alistair in my hand, because Branded Fusion is just so strong. But that is it for the Branded Fusion package. Let's go ahead and get into the final package of the deck, the Shaddoll stuff. Admittedly, the Shaddoll package just keeps getting smaller and smaller because I am so sick of drawing them. But it's really simple. We just have the 1 Shaddoll Beast, the 1 Shaddoll Dragon, and the 1 Shaddoll Schism. Admittedly, it's still more main deck Shaddolls than a lot of these builds play. But yeah, I was playing so many different Shaddolls. I was playing Ariel, I was playing Squamata. At one point, I was playing Hedgehog and Wendy. But I just been cutting them and cutting them and cutting them because drawing the Shaddoll stuff, except for Schism, is one of the worst things you can do with this deck. In fact, at the locals I actually went to today, game 2, I chose to go first. I opened Beast, Dragon, Change of Heart, Fleur, and Ash. And just drawing even one of these can be a complete death sentence because you would have rather drawn anything else. The only real reason we play them in the main deck anyway is because not only does it make Schism a bit more live, but both of them can be sent off of Branded Fusion, so it's good for going first and going second. But overall, I still think it is one of the weaker parts of the deck, and probably the weakest if Schism and Window wasn't such a powerful combination. So yeah, I'm playing less and less and less, and honestly, I might even get to the point where I only play the Beast, but it's just kind of insane how fragile the deck is if you draw even one of the Shaddolls. And so you're mainly using it for the Schism just because of how powerful Wendy is, but it's like, or not Wendy, but Winda. I'm sorry, but it's just, man, it's so sad that the Shaddoll part is probably the weakest part and the strongest part at the same time. That's it for the actual engines of the deck. Let's go ahead and get to the hand traps. We are playing a lot. It's actually roughly a quarter of the deck. We have 3 copies of Ash Blossom, 2 copies of Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, 2 copies of Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion, 1 copy of DD Crow, and 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. The deck on its own doesn't have too many disruptions. You have like Mechabus, Mirror Jade, and stuff like that. You'd rather sit on more like Floodgate cards like Kaliga and Winda. And so obviously we need some other way to facilitate disruptions. So we are playing a lot of hand traps, 11 to be precise, which is just over a quarter of the deck. But these also serve to be, discard fodder, right? Because like I said, we are using our hand a lot, and we'd rather not get rid of our engine pieces if we don't have to. So if we don't draw any bricks to get rid of, like Albaz or things like that, we usually just end up being these as fodder. But overall, it's a pretty balanced ratio. You know, we got the 3 Ash because Ash is Ash. You can drop it down to 2 if you really feel like it. We have the 2 Ogre, which is really strong against Adventure, 2 Bell, and 1 DD Crow, which are both really strong against Despia. Remember, as long as they don't have Branded Lost, every time I had Bell against Despia today, I got Branded Lost on their field, and so I just couldn't do anything with it. And then Imperm is obviously Imperm, and so that's it there. And then finally, just for the miscellaneous spells, we have 2 copies of Super Polymerization. This card is actually insane right now, especially against things like Despia. You can just break boards so easily, and because it's a quick play, you can just set it and use it on your opponent's turn anyway. It's also really good in case you get your Alistair Imperm, but you also open this. You can use it to use your Alistair and something on their field to facilitate something else. Or if you get your Albaz negated, you can also just chain this, and so you're making them waste a disruption or a negate, while also being able to still use it anyway. Change of Heart. This still feels so illegal to play, but it's so funny because almost every time I've used Change of Heart in this deck, it's been relevant. So I decided to play Change of Heart when I realized just how bad this deck was at going second, and so I was like, fuck it, why not? Saki one of, sure, but it's probably going to work out pretty well. Well, it absolutely did. So yesterday I went to my main locals, which unfortunately only had 4 people at it, but I went against our good friend Mrocket's Tenyi Swordsoul, and I used it against him twice, for both of the main reasons that I wanted to play Change of Heart. The first time was in game 1 to take his Cheng-Ying, which, by the way, both of these games will be going up on the channel. Actually, they should already be up, depending on whether or not I decide to make it Monday or Friday. And I know it's a little bit cut, and there might be some ruling issues, but regardless, you can see that the Change of Heart was used to take Cheng-Ying, and then he had to scoop immediately there because he would have died because he can't Chi-Xiao without risking getting Cheng-Ying, so there's that. And then in our final game, I ended up using it to take the Nibiru token when I was under Rivalry, and I absolutely massacred him because that Nib token was huge. And then today, I used it to take my own Winda back, which admittedly didn't win me the game in the end, but it was still pretty nice. And then we had a few other miscellaneous uses of it here and there. I think against Chris on the channel, we actually also used it to take a Drytron thing. We might have taken Draconids or something with it, or at least maybe that was in testing beforehand. But I really like Change of Heart. It's not good if I draw it going first like I have been lately. It's like, wow, I've been drawing this card a lot more than I expected. But going second, it's just an absolute blowout against certain matchups, and so I really enjoy it there. And then finally, we just have the one Called by the Grave, because it is Called by the Grave, and we do like to have our stuff not get disrupted, especially our Branded Fusion, and that is about it there. That's it for the main deck. We are playing 40 cards. Onto the extra deck. Keep in mind, this is all fusions except for like 2 cards because of Branded Fusion, but I actually really enjoy it, though I do wish we had a little bit more space in the extra deck because, wow, I am super tight on this extra deck, almost more so than any other deck that I played except for maybe Bird Up. But let's start off with the Invoke stuff, of course. We have the 1 Mechabus, the 1 Agoides, the 1 Purgatrio, and the 1 Kaliga. I really like the Invoke package overall in terms of the extra deck. At one point, I did cut Purgatrio to experiment with more copies of other things, but Purgatrio actually came up a lot more than I expected, which is funny because I cut it because it didn't come up very often. I don't know, I feel like it's just such a random card that I feel like I have to play it just in case, but it's not really like the most important thing ever, because you're mostly going to be doing your OTKing with Agoides, which I think is an absolutely incredible card. This card clutches so many games, and it's one of my favorite cards in the entire deck. And so I really couldn't see myself playing any sort of Invoke build without it. Kaliga is a bit of a sacky choice because a lot of builds will actually play either no Kaliga or they play like something else, you know, like Raijin, which I don't think is very good right now at all. But a lot of people think Kaliga doesn't really have too much of a spot. But if you'll notice that if you open Branded Fusion and Alistair, your end board's typically Mirror Jade Kaliga, which is a simple spell, but it's quite unbreakable unless they have the out for it specifically, because your one thing is going to be your Mirror Jade, which is a good enough banish to protect the Kaliga, because usually people are going to be, summoning something, be it normal or special summon, and then attempt to beat over the Kaliga, but you have the Mirror Jade there to protect from that, and so it's a really strong addition to your board with the Mirror Jade, and it becomes even stronger when you do have access to something like Schism, because Winda Kaliga Mirror Jade is basically unstoppable. Not to mention that the next turn you still have your Alistair, which under Kaliga and Winda, which by the way is one of the strongest locks I've experienced in the game, Alistair works perfectly fine. You normal summon him, effect, that's your one monster effect, you search your invocation, activate, and then you do your one special summon of something like a Goides, and you sort of just have game in the bag from there. See, I really like Kaliga. I think he's way too strong not to play, at least in this particular build, but it is probably a flex spot that you could interchange with something else. I just think it's way too strong, and in my opinion, to take out. And then obviously we have Mechabus, because Mechabus is Mechabus. It's probably one of the weaker cards in the extra deck, funnily enough, even though Mechabus is kind of what Invoked is known for. But I just like the summoning condition way too much, plus it's relatively large, and using your lights from your opponent's grave is usually pretty good. Honestly, this deck kind of auto-wins against Drytron, which is so funny. Not only because Winda is so powerful, but Invocation can banish their Drytron names from grave. And so it's for situations like that that Mechabus is just so powerful. And then the rest of the quote-unquote Invoked package, we do have All Mirage and Secure Gardener. I don't recommend Artemis. Yeah, the extra deck is really tight and you'd rather not have to play 2 cards, but the All Mirage being engraved for Dogmatika Maximus to be able to banish and then facilitate your free Winda is just way too strong, because opening any way to get access to Alistair and Maximus, or, you know, Ecclesia or whatever like that, is just a free Mechabus and Winda lock, or Kaliga, depending on what else you have in your hand, but regardless. See, I think it's just way too strong to be able to access your Maximus to not play the All Mirage Secure Gardener. I just kind of wish that it didn't take up 2 spots in the extra deck, but really, what can you do? Another sizable chunk of the extra deck is the Albaz portion. We have 1 Titaniclad, 1 Lubellion, 1 Albion, and 1 Mirror Jade. So, pro tip. These are the ones you're sending, these are the ones that you're summoning. Almost every time you're going to be going into Lubellion over anything else. You're almost never going to summon Albion unless you absolutely need to. Titaniclad is there to facilitate your Dogmatika stuff, and then Mirror Jade is your actual end board piece. I actually really love this engine. Like I said, you know, Mirror Jade alone is such a good disruption, and especially with the end phase blow up. Albion is really nice follow-up because you're going to be looping your Lubellion as many times as possible because you can keep shuffling itself back. You know, you can use it for the Mirror Jade, you can use it for Despia, you can use it for Invoked Goides. Hell, if you really feel like it, you can use it for an Albion. But I think this engine just brought so much life into the Invoked strategy that I just really think that if you're playing Invoked right now, you should really be playing the branded package. Like, it's just way too good not to. Yeah, it takes up a lot of space in your extra deck, but really, what were you playing in there anyway? Like, more Shaddoll stuff? Like, why? See, I think it's really strong, way too strong not to play, and is one of the key highlights of the deck as a whole. Next, we have the Shaddoll stuff. I am playing 2 copies of El Shaddoll Winda, and 1 copy of El Shaddoll Apcolone. Sorry, like I said, everything's kind of reversed on my camera, so it's not going to look that great. We have the 2 Winda and the 1 Apcolone. Apcolone, you are literally never going to summon, you're just always going to be dumping it. And then the 2 Winda is something that I keep bouncing back and forth on because I actually was just playing Construct so I played 2 Winda, then I played Winda Construct, and now I'm playing 2 Winda again, because I think having the second Winda is just really strong, because a lot of the time, people will leave the Schism on board not expecting the second Winda after they out the first one, which is really hilarious, and it's also really good in situations where, like, you have a Winda, right? They Chalice or Impermit or whatever, and then they summon a Dark. Well, then you can Super Poly into a second Winda, meaning that they're essentially still fucked either way. So while Construct is really strong, the more I cut down on the main deck, the less good it was. And so I figured take it out for the second Winda is just such a good idea. I don't really think you need much more than this. Construct is the only other one I'd consider playing, but that's only if you're playing a bigger main deck engine, and that's about all there is to say about that. And then finally, we have 2 little miscellaneous things. We have 1 copy of Elder Entity Natus, which is there for your Nadir Servant and your Maximus, of course, for a little bit of extra removal going second. And then we have the 1 Predaplant Dragostapelia. I think this card is really good as a Super Poly target, as well as just being a good card to summon in general. Because yeah, you can Super Poly into it, which is probably your best bet, but you can also use something like Lubellion or Albion to summon it, which is really strong because this card is great. It's a free Imperm while also being 2700. And so especially if you use something on your opponent's board, like if you use like both their Masquerades or something like that, if you're playing against Despia, you kind of just win because, yeah, say they have 2 Masquerade and a Branded in red. Super Poly, use both Masquerades. Not only the Masquerade's gone, but the Branded in red is completely shut down as well, because the Guardian Chimera is not going to be able to use its effect at all because it's a free Imperm. So yeah, that's it for the little miscellaneous dudes in the extra deck, and that's going to round up the extra deck as a whole. I do have some alternative choices for this deck profile, as I mentioned earlier. We have the 1 El Shaddoll Construct, as well as Squamata and Ariel. So these all run hand in hand. I believe If you're playing Aerial, you need to play at least one of the other two, and if you're playing Construct, you have to at least play Aerial. So essentially, Aerial is, like I said, the main, focal point. Aerial is a very strong card if she just stays in your deck, because being able to DD Crow 3 things is amazing, especially if you can bait out something like a Branded in red. And then Squamata is there to facilitate as an extra dump for the Aerial, and that's really about it. Otherwise, don't play the Squamata at all. And then Construct is not only a good dump for Aerial, especially as a disruption on the opponent's turn with Schism, but it also serves as a good alternative target to Winda in case Winda is either not good against the matchup, or in case just having that dump is really good. And Construct is very good as a whole, being able to not only be 2800, but also being able to nuclear bomb any special summon monster that battles it during the damage step. I really do enjoy Construct, but without playing the Aerial anymore, which, like I said, I recently got rid of because I just kept drawing the Shaddolls a bit too much. Without the Aerial, she's just not as great because she doesn't really get too much value off of her dump, but I do think that Construct is still a very strong card, and I would definitely consider it if you feel like it. Some more alternatives you can play that I won't specifically list is a small Despia engine. If you really feel like it, you'd have to cut down on some things in the extra deck, like maybe the Kaliga, the second Winda, stuff like that, but you can play stuff like Masquerade and like a small main deck Despia package, you know, like the branded opening specifically because you don't want to be normal summoning Aluber over something like Alistair. But with that out of the way, guys, that actually is going to do it for the deck profile. So my overall thoughts about this deck, I think it's very strong, especially if you tinker with it a little bit. I probably have a long way to go with it in general, but it's probably not something I'd continue playing for too long, which is a bit of a shame because I do love fusion stuff. It's like my favorite summoning mechanic. But overall, I feel like if you have the money for something like this in general, you should probably just go with Despia, or at least replace one of the engines in here with Despia, probably the Alistair stuff overall. But I do think if you just have an Invoked core laying around and some of the other stuff, or if you're already playing Dogmatika Invoked Shaddoll and you want to add on to it, I feel like it's a fantastic choice for the current metagame, because one of my things that I like about it the most is that 3 out of the 4 engines can just completely play on their own, being the Branded engine, the Alistair engine, and of course the Dogmatika engine. They can also facilitate their own different things without having to rely on each other too much. However, they do strengthen each other greatly. As well, Winda is just such a powerful card, and I feel like honestly a lot of more Despia builds should be playing it, because it's just sort of a win button against so many different strategies. So yeah, if you really feel like it, I think you should totally give this deck a shot if you have the money or if you already have some of the stuff laying around, because it's really fun, especially if you get the hang of it in terms of the ratios. Like I said, I'm still on my way to learning the amount of ratios I should play of each thing, but someone that's played the deck a lot longer than I have, or at least older builds of it, should probably have a lot more luck than me. But with all of that out of the way, that's gonna have to do it for the video. If you liked it, please leave a like, as I'll put this video and the channel into YouTube recommended. And if you like this content, you want to see more like it, like more deck profiles, then perhaps consider subscribing, because I make awesome Yu-Gi-Oh content as often as I can with my busy schedule, and it's completely free and supports the channel more than anything else. But once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. This is Aurora, signing off.